Kirkcudbright, or Cuthbert's Church, is an attractive fishing port on the River Dee in Dumfries and Galloway, southwest Scotland, being about 4 miles from the sea. It was until 1975 the county town of Kirkcudbrightshire, and is commonly known as the Artists' Town, being the home and workplace of many artists. Previous volumes in this series have covered the Port Road, the railway line which connected Dumfries via Castledouglas and Newton Stewart to Stranraer and on to Portpatrick. Here we look at the branch from Castledouglas to Kirkcudbright, which opened in 1864, but, along with the rest of the Port Road, closed under the beaching cuts in 1965. We saw in Volume 1 how the site of the Castledouglas railway station has been taken over by a Tesco superstore, whilst the goods yard beyond it is now a minor industrial estate. Beyond that, the winding A745 road from Dalbeattie took over part of the old railway trackbed to provide a straighter, smoother experience for motorists. Let's follow the trackbed now through the old goods yard and on to the site of the passenger station. Immediately beyond the station, the railway passed underneath the A75 road, leading from the Anglo-Scottish border at Gretna Green to Stranraer. Through road traffic now bypasses the town. Here the Kirkcudbright branch departs from the main line to Stranraer, which was on the line of the footpath leading straight ahead. Our branch took the route of the path to the left. And here we see a train from Kirkcudbright approaching Castledouglas and about to join the line from Stranraer. Note that both lines are single track. The old trackbed is marked, as so often, by the line of trees. Just before the route passes under Abercrombie Road was the original Castledouglas station for the branch. A curious story here. Nowadays many junctions, such as the old Glasgow and South Western with the Caledonian at Gretna Junction, are singled to reduce the amount of track work. But when this branch opened in 1864, the authorities refused to allow trains to access the line from Stranraer until the junction had been doubled. So it was that Castledouglas St Andrews Street station was opened here, and passengers travelling onward had to make their own way to the town station to continue their journeys. The simple wooden platformed station remained in use for nearly 4 years. I've been unable to locate any picture, drawing or plan of the station, and nothing remains today but the adjacent road bridge. Castledouglas's best known landmark is probably Carlingwark Loch, a freshwater loch to the south of the town. It provides a source of shell marl, historically used by farmers to improve their soil. In 1765, a 1.5-mile canal, the Carlingwark Lane, was dug to connect the Loch to the River Dee to enable flat-bottomed boats to carry the marl to farms up the river. The land in this area was a deep bog and posed problems for the builders. A wooden viaduct was built to cross the canal. In 1884, a train derailed here and the locomotive overturned in 5 feet of water, drowning the driver and fireman. No passengers were aboard, or the death toll might have been much higher. The River Dee flows from Loch Dee in the Galloway Hills to reach the Solway Firth in Kirkcudbright Bay. We encountered it in Volume 2 of this series when we crossed the Loch Cairn Viaduct, and also at the Loch Viaduct, where it was known as the Black Water of Dee. Just upstream from the railway is Threave Island, on which is sited Threave Castle, built by Archibald the Grim in 1369 and a stronghold of the Black Douglases. For 21 years it was the seat of the powerful Margaret, Lady of Galloway. Its artillery held off the forces of James II for some time before he eventually captured it. Sadly, like a number of other properties under the management of Historic Scotland, it has fallen into disrepair, and the boat trip across the river to visit the castle is no longer permitted to the public. The minor road which leads from the A75 to the Nature Reserve and Castle Car Park retains its bridge over the old railway trackbed, which is clearly visible today. Just follow the trees to see where the trains once ran. The railway crossed the river by means of 2 bridges, one each side of Lamb Island. The bridge to the east of the island remains intact, but only the support pillars remain of the western bridge. Let's follow the line as it heads to the west. To our left is the A75 road, and immediately beyond it is the village of Bridge of Dee. Ahead of us is the site of Bridge of Dee Station. The old station house is now a private residence, and beyond that is an old railway carriage, which the station house owners have converted into a holiday let. From the road bridge we have a fine view of the beautifully maintained station, with part of the platform still in place. Having booked only 2 passengers per day in 1948, the station closed to passengers in 1949. And to goods in 1955. The original road led directly into the village of Bridge of Dee. The old Bridge of Dee was built between 1737 and 1740, and clearly didn't envisage the motor age. Only 1 car at a time is permitted on the bridge, for fairly obvious reasons. The old trackbed is still clearly evident until it reaches the remains of the bridge, carrying it over the minor road running north to Loch. The railway continued in a southwesterly direction, passing the little community of Ringford, for whom no station was provided. Some parts of the trackbed have been overlaid by the improved A75 road. The line continued its journey, followed the line of trees above the road, until it reached the station and passing place at Tarf. The tiny community remains beside the high bridge of Tarf, but little of the station can be seen today. Its site is occupied by Tarf Valley, an agricultural cooperative. The old station building can just be glimpsed between the trees. The line continues towards Kirkcudbright, follow the trees, and now at last separates from the A75 road, with the railway heading south as the road swings away to the west on the former ferry port of Stranraer. The old trackbed is intact, totally visible, and in use as a farm track, as it makes its way through this agricultural landscape. It runs parallel to the A762 road as it heads towards the forested Castle Hill, with its ancient hill fort. Ahead of us we see the confluence of the Tarf water and the River Dee. Beyond the forested Castle Hill, no trace of the old track is apparent, but the route heads towards its final crossing of the Dee as it approaches Kirkcudbright. The old road bridge was built by Thomas Telford and completed in 1805. On the southern bank of the river, we see the remains of the railway bridge, originally named the Prince of Wales Viaduct. The viaduct remained in place for 14 years after closure of the line, until the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers blew it up in 1979. Part of the northern approach structure remains, although it is not easily seen, and all trace of the embankment beyond the A711 road has disappeared. Immediately upstream of the viaduct is the Tongland hydroelectric power station, dating from the 1930s and part of the Galloway hydro scheme, consisting of 6 power stations, 8 dams and a network of tunnels, aqueducts and pipelines spanning 40 miles from north to south. At the time of making this video, the power station was being upgraded by new owners Drax and was covered in protective sheeting. This is what it looked like previously. The River Dee is dammed some half a mile or so above the power station, and a fish ladder is provided for migratory salmon. The station is used these days as a booster at times of peak demand. Its output of 33 megawatts seems small by present standards, but it was an ambitious project back in the 1930s, before the development of the national grid. When the power station was first planned, there were proposals to build a siding from the nearby Kirkcudbright line to bring in the materials and equipment for the task. Several plans were mooted, but eventually it was decided to use road transport. Given the nature of the local roads in the 2020s, one dreads to think what they must have been like in the 1930s. Beyond the Tongland viaduct, the line continued into the centre of the town. Although much of it has been overbuilt, it's surprising how evident the old route is when followed from the air. On the outer approaches, trees continue to mark the old trackbed, and as we get closer to the old station, streets and lanes often occupy the route upon which steam trains ran. Here the line crossed the road in a very different age, when this was still more or less open country. To the left is the old Johnston Primary School, now a planetarium. And finally, we reach Journey's End at Bridge Street, where we run up against the buffers. The station boasted an engine shed and turntable, seen here on the left, as well as a signal box. 10th of August 1963, the gala day in Kirkcudbright, saw an inexperienced driver lose control of his engine, strike the coaches standing in the platform to form the morning train to Dumfries, separating the bodies from the bogies, and propel them through the low station wall and across the street. Fortunately, no one was hurt. The old station house remains, not as a private residence, but somewhat unusually, as a cookery school. The entire line was just 10¼ miles long. The only intermediate stations were Bridge of Dee and Tarf, and as we have seen, neither could offer much in the way of passenger traffic. Tarf served a surrounding area and claimed to be the station for Ringford, Tongland, Twynham, Borg, and even Gatehouse of Fleet, at distances of 1.3 miles, 2.8 miles, 2.1 miles, 7.5 miles, and 7.3 miles respectively. Small wonder that the advent of motor road transport quickly saw off the passenger traffic. Bradshaw's Railway Guide for 1922 shows 7 daily weekday trains between Dumfries, Castledouglas and Kirkcudbright, with an 8th on Saturday, but none at all on Sundays. By 1957, the passenger service consisted of 3 trains daily through to Dumfries, and 1 which terminated at Castledouglas, with an extra service to each destination on Saturdays. The current bus timetable shows a roughly hourly service between Castledouglas and Kirkcudbright, but if you want to travel from Dumfries, you have to break your journey at Castledouglas and wait for a connecting service. Only 2 late evening buses do the complete trip. Although the Sunday service is less frequent, most of the Sabbath buses cover the whole route. Well, there we are. A short railway line into what was once a very isolated area, and which must have represented a major leap forward in 1864, but which, like so many of the smaller railway lines of the United Kingdom, simply couldn't compete with the sheer convenience of the motor vehicle, and was doomed to extinction.